The Labor Party's come out firing this morning, claiming National's climate policy might as well be denial. It claims National's policy of opposing climate action would see an extra 23.92 million tonnes of carbon dioxide emissions in the atmosphere by 2030. To give you some context, that's about the equivalent of an extra emissions from 1.2 million cars. National Party leader Christopher Luxon is with us to respond this morning. Morena, good morning.
Good morning, Ryan. Happy birthday to you. Hope you have a special day today.
Thank you very much. I tell you what is special is this sort of broadside that's come your way from the Labor Party this morning. So they've basically said at best you're greenwashing, at worst you're climate change denying.
Oh, look, this is a Labor Party beat-up. They want us to be distracted and deflected from talking about what we should be, which is about abysmal levels of attendance at our schools. But it's coming also from a government that's talked big on climate change and just really under-delivered. So, from my point of view, it is what it is. It's lovely that they're fixated on us and the National Party, but they really should be fixated on getting their job done and using the resources of government to do so. OK, fair enough. But do they have a point? Because this is where, we run into problems. Do they have a point? You've opposed the clean car discount, minimum standards for new cars and homes, support to remove coal boilers. You continue to wait to reduce methane emissions. This is what they're claiming. And yet you agree with net zero by 2050. So how will you get there if not through these means? Yeah, so Ryan, what's going on here is, look, we deeply are committed to net carbon zero by 2050. We're the party that actually signed New Zealand up to the Paris Agreement, and we believe very strongly in actually delivering those targets. But the means by which we deliver those ends, which may be the same as the government, but the way that we'll do it will be different. To give you some examples, the first thing is we believe that the emissions trading scheme is our best chance to be able to bend our emissions profile here in New Zealand. But at the moment, all we have to do is be able to offset some carbon through planting pine trees and farmland across New Zealand, rather than actually looking at other things that we can put into that, like carbon capture, native trees, and even looking at seagrasses and mangroves on our oceans. So there's a lot of alternatives we could be using there. The second thing I'd say to you is we looked at the government's emissions reduction plan. There's 330 actions in there. Half of them are about hui and meetings and post-it note sessions and facilitating strategies rather than actually getting things done. We think the government should do things that uniquely a government can do to accelerate the emissions piece. One would be to make sure that we're investing in, say, an EV network, a charging network across the country. Two would be make sure we're investing really strongly in research and development. And three, make sure we get planning reform in place so that we can actually undertake offshore wind and faster renewals and resource consents. We wouldn't be, for example, Ryan, actually having everyday Kiwis contribute to the ETS at the pump only for that money to then be given away by the government to large multinational companies that should be doing that climate reduction themselves. That's just corporate welfare at that point. So we agree with the ends. We are deeply committed to that. Do not ever underestimate our commitment to that. But the means by which we do it, and just agreeing that the government's approach is the right approach when it's a government that just cannot get things done and never delivers. Yeah,
see, and even still, that was a very long answer, but actually the most new I got out of it was seagrass and mangroves in the ocean. Is that really going to fill the hole that they've described you've got? This is the problem you've got, isn't it? That you actually haven't set out exactly how you are going to reduce emissions to fill the hole that Labor's talking about. So when do you think you will have a concrete plan so that you can at least say to them, look, we haven't got there yet?
Well, look, I appreciate the Labor Party wants us to bring our policy forward this year. We have been working incredibly hard on our policies over the last 6 to 9 months. We have sessions here in Parliament every Tuesday, every Wednesday night to do exactly that, and we'll be releasing that through the course of next year and as we get to the election. But, here's a good example. We've got a situation at the moment where we've got a government that is actually taxing people with utes, and there is no alternative, and then actually subsidising those utes, wealthy Tesla drivers by giving them subsidies. We think there'd be a different way to do it. We'd keep the clean car discounts and make sure that we've got low emission cars coming in. We would actually invest in an EV charging network, and we'd also make sure we're actually helping lower income people access EVs, not rich people. OK, all right.
So you would keep the clean car discount, and OK, that's interesting. All right, let's talk about education very quickly, because this is quite important. I was listening to you in the House yesterday, going hammer and tongs about literacy, numeracy rates falling, but the government's still pushing more money into the system. The results aren't getting better. Can you give us one tangible thing that you would do So parents know this morning, because we have parents writing to us saying they're actually thinking about sending their kids to private schools rather than public ones. It's kind of that bad. They're that worried about their kids' education. So what's one thing that you would do differently that would lift those rates?
Well, the first thing we have to do around education is we have to get our kids to school, Ryan. I mean, we have 60% of our kids not at school regularly. We have 100,000 chronically absent.
How?
And I just want New Zealand to understand those numbers, because that is really incredibly sobering. Other developed countries run at about 80, 85% around the world.
How do you do that?
What we've got to do is have a really big focus on attendance, yes. So the first thing is we've got to make sure government is actually putting resources into truancy officers, getting kids to school. We need to make sure that we've actually got leadership in schools that is actually very much focused on getting kids into school.
But they are.
I'll talk a little bit about a school I visited that's doing an exception.
There's no school leader who's not focused on that.
There's mixed. No, there is a mixed standard of leadership across our schools and across our principals that actually means that they're not focusing as strongly on getting kids to school as they can.
So you're saying some principals...
we have to call parents to responsibility.
You're saying some principals aren't focused on truants, on getting kids into their schools?
Well, here's an example, Ryan. We have 77% of our Decile 1 kids not going to school regularly.
So Decile 1 principals aren't focused on attendance?
No, I'm just saying that it requires strong leadership, and we need to support that leadership to be able to get that attendance rate up. Last week, I went to Manurewa Intermediate School. It was the most inspiring school I have ever visited in my life.
Okay, so which schools aren't inspiring you?
And the reason is...
Which principals aren't inspiring you?
Manurewa, I'll tell you... Well, Manurewa Intermediate School is a Decile 1A school, and they have attendance rates in the 90%, 80 to 90%.
Yeah,
That's
because they've got good school leaders. So which schools? Because you've said that some...
They've got very strong school leaders. They've got great staff. They call their parents to their responsibility and make them really accountable for getting their kids to school and showing up at parent-teacher interviews, and they have really deeply engaged programs and therefore deeply engaged kids and students in study. And I would just encourage you, go out and visit that school, because it is so exciting to see.
Okay, no, that's great. That's fantastic.
To accept abysmal results when we have pockets of excellence like that. We just need to make sure we've got more of those pockets up and down the country.
So who is accepting of abysmal attendance records? I mean, this is the thing. Today we're going to have principals who are saying, hang on a minute, is he talking about me?
No, what I'm talking about is we have standards of excellence where you can get a Decile 1 school delivering high levels of attendance, and yet across the whole country we can't. And it requires a systemic response to say we're not going to make any more excuses. You can't run a country and have a future when you have 40% of your kids at school, attending school. That's just not going to cut it. It's a moral failure, it's a social failure, it's an economic crisis. So we have to all, government, schools and parents, be really accountable for getting our kids to school. That's what matters most in our education system. The rest of it, yes, we need to go back to teaching basics. We have really falling levels of academic achievement. But the first thing is we've got to get our kids to school. So when we see things working, like Manurewa Intermediate, we want to understand what is happening there and why are they achieving such excellent results, and what can we learn from them. And the government's role should be make sure that that good practice goes everywhere and we actually get our kids back to school. We cannot have a culture of excuses like we've been having. And the government's tolerating it. It's just not good enough.
All right, we have to leave it there. Christopher Luxon, the National Party leader of the opposition, thank you very much for your time, as always, for a Wednesday morning.